Good evening, everybody. We are just going to give it a few more minutes here and hope that a few more people can jump in, and we'll get started here in a couple minutes. So thanks for joining us tonight, and we'll get this started here soon. All righty. Good evening, everybody. And again, thank you for joining us this evening. Can you mute that? Okay, thanks. Just wanted to, sorry, we got a few people in the room here, just making sure that we're all kind of on the same page as far as technology goes. Again, thank you for joining us this evening. Just a few things as we get started here. You can see on the bottom of the screen here, on the bottom of your screen, there should be that option for a Q&A down there. If you click on that, as we're going through this presentation, if there's any questions you want to ask, feel free to type them in at any time. We will do our best to answer those questions when we get to the end of this presentation. Yeah, and if you could also, provide your name and address as well too, that would be helpful for us. Quickly want to go over some history on the Streetscape project that we have here. So as you're aware, back in August of 2018, the Warren County voters did approve a bond referendum for a new Warren County Justice Center. Shortly thereafter, the city partnered with a few people, Warren County Economic Development in the Indianola Chamber, to work with the Iowa Economic Development Authority to assess our public square. Some of the comments that we got based off that assessment were that the square could use some love. There was some challenges in walkability, wanted to improve the look and feel of our downtown, and a few other things that are listed on the screen here as well. So again, in October of 2018, the city did seek some proposals to develop a high-level streetscape concept that came again off that assessment that we did. In February of 2019, we did sign a professional service agreement with Bolton and Mink. They then began through the months of March and August of 2019 to work through a planning document that would work. We worked with a steering committee that was made up of 24 24 members of the community, mainly business members in and around the square, and then held multiple civic engagement meetings during this time. Ultimately, in August of 2019, the Indianola City Council did approve the downtown square master plan. After that approval, we started working on our fiscal year 21 budget, where we then started earmarking money for the streetscape construction project. In May of 2020, we did sign an engineering contract with Bolton Mink that then kicked into gear the design process of our streetscape. Also wanted to mention, in that same month, we did approve our comprehensive plan as a city. One of the things that came out of that was there was a survey that was done, taken by over 1,600 community people. And one question was asked during that survey, and it said, you're in charge of the city's capital improvement budget. This budget is for building new things or making major repairs or renovations, not for ongoing expenses. How should these limited funds be spent? Wanted to note that the first, the highest one that was given the highest amount of dollars was roads. The next highest amount was downtown. The Streetscape does take care of two of those things. Obviously, we're looking at repairing the roads, replacing the roads in the downtown area, but then also making some major aesthetical improvements to our downtown area. Mentioned previously that we had a 24-member steering committee that was formed. Again, that was 17 business owners in and around the square, as well as 7 other people within the community. Sorry, my math is off. That also helped out. Some of the information we got back from that steering committee was that one-way traffic may cause avoidance on the square and limit the amount of traffic and foot traffic. It is good to increase traffic passing by businesses. Many other communities have completed one-way to two-way conversions. The square was very car friendly, but not very people friendly. Access to downtown was limited, and they wanted to continue two-way traffic on Howard and Buxton. So some of the recommendations that also came from the steering committee, again, bump outs at crosswalks for improved pedestrian safety, parallel parking on the business side of the square, which led to angle parking on the courthouse side, and many other things that are listed on the screen here. So now we are kind of to the point where we wanted to present the Streetscape project as we have it today. So you can see here on the screen, and if you can see my mouse pointer right here, this is Ashland, this is Salem, Howard, and Buxton. You can see that we're proposing with the Streetscape project to look at 3 blocks of the east-west roads, which again are Ashland and Salem, as well as the the 1 block areas on Howard and Buxton. Going north here, we've identified these as bid alternates, and that's where we then take a look at kind of where our costs are as a project to see if we do those. And we're also looking at the city-owned parking lots. The city has 3 city-owned parking lots, one right here, one here. Also this one right here. This one right here is actually in decent shape, but these 2 could use
Got it.
Okay, sorry, guys, I apologize. We had a little bit of a technical glitch there, but Kurt, Mike, if you are still there, and I don't know, Mike, do you want to start out? Mike, you're muted.
Yep,
There you go.
I'm here. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, Mike, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So I'll just kind of go through with the Streetscape project with in terms of things that are going to happen in and around it as far as electrical. In the back alleyways, we are in the process of, since the alleys are going to have some major work done to them, we felt like it made a lot of sense to partner and get in there and convert some of that overhead electric, and Kurt's on here as well as far as fiber, convert that. And I could probably turn my camera on so people could see me talking. So as we work through that, we've involved engineers and getting things ready to go to bid that out along at the same time as the city does with the streetscape. So we just want to make sure everybody kind of knows we'll be contacting you, and if you have any questions, to reach out to us, and we'd be more than happy to discuss how the electric and Kurt can speak to the fiber, how that will affect everyone. Definitely, I know always one concern anytime we do anything electrical, there's always concern about power is going to have to be off at some point in time. Rest assured, we will work with every business on the square to schedule that when it's convenient for every single business. So like I say, I can definitely provide everybody with my email and my direct line at the office there. It's I don't know if Charlie, if we have that on there, otherwise I can give it to everybody. It's M Metcalf, so MMETCALF at indianola.iowa.gov. And then my direct line to the office is 515-962-5305. There, Charlie popped it up. Yeah, Kurt, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I could just add that, as the scope of the streetscape project expanded into the alleys, it has affected the fiber. Most of our feeder distribution and premise routes around the square are aerial in those back alleys. So those will be going underground as well, which is a good thing, but that will mean we'll need to schedule some time to in the future to make that switch from overhead to underground for your existing service. So this will result in some downtime again for us as well, but our hope is to obviously make that as short a time as of a period as we can. So we'll also reach out to everyone individually as time gets closer to make the change. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to call or email. So.
Great, thank you guys. Appreciate the update on that. And again, if anybody has any questions from either of them, their contact information's on the screen here. And just again, want to reiterate, if anybody has any general questions, feel free to put them in the question and answer box, and we will work to answer those at the end of the presentation. On the screen here again shows some of the improvements we are going to be making. This particular one is on Salem Avenue, which will just be to the south of the new courthouse facility. Shows you kind of what the overall project is going to look like, again, with the angled parking on the courthouse side, parallel parking on the business side. With the circles being added in here, those are all new trees that will be added in to the streetscape. You can see where we are proposing permeable pavers along the parking areas. The mainline drives will all be concrete, some bioswales, rain gardens, stuff like that are also being added in. Got kind of just a general concept of what it will look like as far as widths. You'll see where we are adding quite a bit of width to the sidewalks. That was a very big thing that came out of the streetscape project, was the businesses wanted more room on the sidewalks to be able to kind of have some of their business functions within that area, as well as, again, we're adding the trees in, the planter boxes, and needing some room for that because we needed to increase that sidewalk width. We do lose a little bit of width when it comes to parking, and that's why parallel parking is proposed on the business side. But you can see here again, just normal drive lanes of 12 to 13 feet. These aren't exacts. I think the final plans kind of show half a foot here or there, either way on some of these, but as general concept, this is what it will be once constructed. We are also proposing to do some pedestrian archway monuments and some gateway monuments. Here in a few slides, I'll show you what those will look like. Did want to point out here on this screen, if everybody can kind of see For example, this is the intersection of Salem and Howard. These lines right here are where the existing curb is on the courthouse side. And again, down here, these are where the existing curbs are on the current business side of everything. You can see where we're really bumping out those crosswalk areas to provide a shorter length that pedestrians are going to have to travel when crossing streets. So again, I pointed out before that these drive lanes here are 13 feet apiece. So really from this point to this point, it's about 26 feet. Same with all of these down here. I point that out to point out the existing conditions that we have today within the square. You can see existing conditions just across Howard Street here, about 45 feet, across Salem, about 40 feet. And just because of the circular curb pattern of the current courthouse side, you've got almost 80 to 90 feet that you have to cross from the other side of the street to get to the sidewalk over there. And again, we are going to be reducing all of those to just 26 feet with the added curb bump outs that will be added. So one major pedestrian enhancement that is going to be made to the square with this project. Going back to what the monumentation will look like, these are the monuments that will be placed within this area. And then we'll also have these monuments that will be placed. These are going to serve as a little bit of wayfinding as well, because we will propose to put these monuments along Highway 92 and 65, 69 as well to try to direct the traffic into the square. As part of the steering committee's responsibility, they also looked at some furniture, some pavement styles, and some planter material that will be used in there. And you can see the options that they were given. The ones that they chose not to go with are the ones that are grayed out, and the ones that they did choose, the ones that the steering committee really liked, are the ones you can kind of see in full color. These are examples from other communities on how the permeable pavers have worked and what they do look like. On the right side of the screen, wanted to point that out because you can see this is actually the permeable pavers being laid down in mid-construction. You can see the rock that is placed underneath these, and in some areas that rock can be as much to 2 to 3 feet deep in some areas. That rock, what it does is it catches the water that is flowing off the streets and stores that within that rock, then reducing the amount of stormwater that runs into the city sewer system, storm sewer system. And then ultimately, this is what it's going to look like. This was a concept that was used in the planning process. So you'll notice here that the pavers aren't showing up, but I think it still kind of gives a pretty good high level view of what this is going to look like when it's completed with the two-way traffic patterns, the parallel parking and the angled parking, and then the increased sidewalk space for the businesses. Also wanted to point out when we look at where we're at today, this project isn't going to be done in one giant chunk. We are planning on phasing this project in. And this is being done for a few reasons. As we coordinate with the businesses and as we coordinate with the Justice Center project, we have found that we want to phase this project in, so we are limiting the amount of disruption that we're causing with this project. So as of right now, we are looking at approximately a 5-phase project that will last approximately 18 months. Everything goes perfect, we'd probably get 3 phases done in the first year and the final 2 phases done the year after. But just wanted to have everybody see this so they can kind of get a good idea of what we're looking at. Ultimately, these phasing plans and the exact boundaries of them could shift a little bit here and there. Numbers possibly switched around. Once we get a contractor on board, we are going to be able to kind of have a better understanding of what this will look like. So as of today, we did recently complete our 90% design documents. Those are under review, both by internal staff as well as part of our grant funding that we got for this. The Iowa DNR, as part of the SRF grant that we have, also has to review these documents, and that is taking place right now. We're continuing to coordinate both with the county and our utilities on this. As of today, our proposal is to advertise bids for this project on March 23rd. That's at the point that council would set the public hearing date to accept the bids. So we would look then at opening bids on April 14th and then potentially awarding a contract on April 19th. I'm going to get into this here in the next few slides, the one-way to two-way conversion. But as of today, we are planning on that happening on May 17th. That is a Monday. And then we're looking at construction beginning in sometime May to June. Again, we have to get a contractor on board before we have an exact date for that. And then completion, the completion date that we propose would be August 30th of 2022, with damages after that date of $1,000 per day. So getting into the one-way to two-way, and this is one of the reasons that one of the things that we really wanted to point out this evening. We've looked at this, we've looked at the pros and cons. Some of the material that we have here, just to note, this isn't coming from us. This is coming from various engineering studies that we've looked at, that our contractor Bolton and Mink has looked at, to really dig into what the pros and cons of two-way as opposed to one-way traffic is. So some of the pros that are noted are business exposure increases when you have traffic traveling both ways on the street. It does improve the livability, property values, business revenue and taxes. Bike and pedestrian safety goes up immensely. It does eliminate the raceway effect as it slows traffic down. Driver attention does increase and traffic safety improves. There is a reduction in total distance traveled. We point this out, for example, if somebody's coming into the square and they're looking at going on the south side, they potentially have to drive around all four sides of the square to get to the south side, where with two-way traffic, they're able to get there in a much quicker manner. With that, there is enhanced public safety access. So if there's any incidents that take place on the square, our public safety officials are able to get to businesses much faster. Easier navigation for residents and businesses. One-way streets can be confusing to visitors or infrequent users. It eliminates wrong-way drivers, and there is less signage and pavement markings that are needed. And I'll get into that last point here in a little bit. Some of the cons that we looked at, there is an adjustment period for drivers. It does take everybody a little bit to adjust to the new traffic patterns. One of the things that we look at is delivery vehicles. Currently within the square, delivery vehicles are able to kind of park onto one lane of the one-way traffic, while traffic is still able to go around them. With two-way traffic, that gets a little bit more difficult, but with the slowed down vehicles, we hope that won't be too much of a hindrance. The number of vehicle and pedestrian conflict points potentially increases when you have traffic heading both ways. Ultimately, that wouldn't be the case if people were using both lanes on the one-way traffic, but we know within our square, people are just using one lane. And now when we have two lanes of traffic going on, that potentially increases. Through traffic is slowed down. That's one of the goals of the Streetscape project, was to make that traffic slow down a little bit. That helps the businesses out. And there are one-time labor and capital cost in removing signage, turning signs around, removing paint on the roads, etc. But over the lifetime of that, those costs to maintain that infrastructure also decrease. So as part of this, we did look at, we set up a speed camera on a few streets to kind of get some data to really get a good understanding of how North Howard and North Buxton streets were operating. We also then looked at North D Street. If the community will recall, North D Street used to be a one-way street that was some time ago here, then changed to a two-way street. So North Howard Street and North Buxton Street both saw in 24-hour time period about 1,300 vehicles. Looking at the average speed of vehicles on both of those streets was about 26 to 27 miles an hour. Take a look at the top speed on those two roads. The top speed that was reached on Howard was 48 miles an hour, while the top speed on Buxton was 52 miles an hour. Almost 2/3 of the drivers traveling on those two streets were going over the speed limit. And when you look at the 85th percentile, that's the speed that 85% of the drivers are going. On both streets, it was 30 miles an hour. Now, then I take you over to D Street, where we have two-way traffic. Again, a little bit less vehicular count in that 24-hour period, but the average speed on D Street went down to 23.5 miles an hour. The top speed was reduced to 35 miles an hour. The percent traveling over the speed limit was 1/3 of the drivers, as opposed to 2/3 of the drivers on the one-way traffic. And the 85th percentile was at 28 miles an hour. So with this data, we are able to see that with two-way traffic, speeds are greatly reduced in these corridors. Also wanted to look at the comp plan and how that relates to what these streets are considered. So both North Howard Street and North Buxton Street are considered minor collectors. Minor collectors are corridors generally having a speed limit of 25 miles an hour, which both of these corridors do. They're meant to provide connections to major collectors and arterial streets. Their primary routes for trip destinations, such as the downtown square. The streets do include accommodations for people biking and walking, and it may require traffic calming measures, particularly when bicyclists are expected to share the travel lanes with motorized vehicles. Bring that up to then point out our trails plan. We have the city of Indianola does have a trails plan, and that trails plan does identify some connections between the square and Buxton Park and the Jerry Kelly Trail that does go into Buxton Park. So as part of this project, we are looking at putting a bike lane in on Buxton Street. The trails plan does show that the shared bicycle lanes would be done on both Howard and Buxton, but that's because of the one-way traffic currently. Noting that we are going to two-way traffic, we do know that it's only necessary in one corridor, and mainly because of Buxton Park and Simpson College, we feel that that corridor should be Buxton Street. So as part of the conversion on the two-way traffic, we are also looking at adding shared bicycle lanes on the Buxton Street. So what will it take to do this one-way to two-way conversion? We did an inventory with the help of Bolton and Mink on all these signs that we have in this corridor. Maybe surprised, but there's 370 total signs in these two corridors. With this conversion, we will need 20 additional signs. We'll be able to remove 164 signs, and there's 50 signs that will need to be rotated. Most of those are just no parking signs all located along the corridor. So with that, we have 144 less signs that will be in our inventory. So over the lifetime of that, again, we have less signs in our inventory, less signs that need to be replaced, less signs that need to be maintained. So that's ultimately going to be a cost savings to the city. There's also 28 pavement markings within these two corridors. That number does not include markings within the public square because that's going to all be taken care of with the Streetscape project. But of those, all 28 need to be removed. However, we are going to have to add approximately 14 pavement markings on Buxton Street for the bike lanes that will be added. It's going to take various ordinance changes to make the one-way to two-way traffic work, and I put a few code sections up here, but those code changes, approximately 2 months to get through that process, and we're proposing to start that here very soon. So at this point, we've done a few traffic studies on these corridors as what we need as far as traffic calming, excuse me, not traffic calming, but traffic control on this. And AP, Akhilesh Pal, who is our Public Works Director, I'm going to hand it off to him, and I'm going to have him kind of explain what was looked at in all these areas and kind of what we're looking at doing as far as these studies go.
Thank you, Charlie. Hope you can listen to me. My name is AP. I'm the Public Works Director for City of Indianola. As Charlie mentioned, we have finished a few engineering studies. If you can see the map here, we have finished these engineering studies on these 4 locations. The first one is a traffic signal warrant study at the signalized intersection of Buxton and 2nd Avenue. And the other 3 locations that we studied were a warrant for a multi-way stop for the intersections of Howard and Clinton, Buxton and Iowa, and Howard and Iowa. So Charlie, if you can take me to the next slide, please. So basically the first one we finished is a signal warrant study after we got a grant from the Iowa DOT, which is basically called the Traffic Engineering Assistance Program. Once we got the grant, the DOT used consultant engineers to complete a signal warrant study. So what is this? The signal warrant study is basically a set of federal standards called the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. They have several factors from traffic volumes, accident history, geometry, sight distance, speed, and capacity analysis. Based on this traffic signal study, it shows that it meets the signal warrants even after it's converted to two-way conversion. Currently, this intersection is operating as a three-legged intersection because Buxton Street essentially functions as a one-way traffic. If this is converted to a four or two-way traffic, then this intersection will have to operate as a four-legged intersection. So this traffic study has indicated that we will have to upgrade the signal to ensure that that it meets the requirements for a four-legged intersection and the requirements for the traffic signal. So one of the things they required is recommended is a short-term improvements, which is the basic improvements needed to convert this signal to a four-legged intersection, which is basically new signal or signal controllers, poles needed to cater the two-way traffic, and some temporary changes, which is amounting to less than $100,000. And then we have the long-term improvements for roughly about $150,000, which will upgrade all the signal poles, all the requirements for any other upgrades needed for the signal, which is basically new detection devices. This will also use the components from the interim or the short-term improvements that we have already installed. So one of the things that we are trying to accomplish is to the staff will be trying to secure more funding required for the long-term improvements. Iowa DOT from time to time provides funding for these improvements. So we will be trying to secure more funding towards this process. Charlie, if you can take me to the next slide, please. Charlie, can you take me to the next slide, please? Can you hear me, Charlie?
Yep, I hold on one second. I got it flipped on mine. It might just take a second.
I'm sorry. So thank you, Charlie. So the other component of this was where we completed the multi-way stop warrant study, which was at 3 different intersections. And in this table, you can see where it met the warrants. The only location where it met the warrants was at Howard and Clinton. And these were again based on the same criteria. But when I say same criteria, different traffic volume criteria, different accident history, geometry, and capacity analysis. One of the biggest things on these criteria are that if the side streets and the main streets have similar amount of traffic, that is where it meets the requirements for a multi-way stop study, multi-way stop. But here in this case, the side streets were less than 1/3 to 1/4 the amount of main street traffic on Iowa or on Clinton. So none of them met based on the criteria for traffic volume or accident history. The only place where it met the requirement was at Howard and Clinton because the sight distance on some of the approaches were severely restricted because of the buildings that's really close to the right of way, really close to the intersection. And that is why it met the requirements for a multi-way stop. Having said that, the city council has the final decision on these multi-way stops, and they will basically review these and based on the best interest of the neighborhood, they will be deciding whether a multi-way stop will be required or not. And it takes roughly about less than $500 of material and labor to install a new multi-way stop per intersection. I think this ends my slide for the stop warrants. If you want to take over, Charlie.
Yeah, thank you, AP, and thanks for that update on that. So just got a few slides left here. The other thing that we have been looking at and working hand in hand with the U.S. Post Office and the Indianola Postmaster is the mailboxes. Currently, as you travel south on Buxton by the post office, the mailboxes are located on the east side of the road, which would be the left-hand side because that works for one-way traffic. When you go to two-way traffic, those mailboxes would only work if you have a passenger in your vehicle. So we're looking at a few options on how we can continue to have this level of drive-through mail drop-off. You'll see on the right side of the screen here, now this is kind of flipped around. You got First Avenue up on top, and then Highway 92 would be on the bottom. We are looking at adding what would be somewhat of a median there as a separate drive-through lane, where these mailboxes can still function as they do today, just a little bit over on the side. And then you also do have about you have 24 feet of roadway still left to have 12-foot drive lanes to go through there, still meet standards. So we are looking at that, and we are continuing to evaluate what we do with the mailboxes on that. But we have got some estimates and looking to build this into the overall streetscape project, just to make sure that citizens are able to still have a drive through mail drop-off feature. So with that, again, I wanted to bring this screen back up here on where we're at today and kind of some of our expectations moving forward. At this point, that concludes our presentation that we have here. And I know we've got a few questions that we have submitted here. So we'll start taking those questions. But again, as we go through this, if there's any other questions that anybody has, feel free to keep putting them in that Q&A box.
Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Ryan Waller. I'm the city manager. I'm going to be handling the questions. I've been monitoring them, writing them down. We have some addresses for some of the questions. We do not have others. So if you've typed in a question, if you can please provide your address. So if we do need to provide any sort of follow-up, we can. I'll go through those that we have addresses for. The first question is, what is the estimate of time frame this summer? We're going to be bidding that out this spring with construction anticipated for this summer. Then the next question is, the Streetscape Committee had discussed signage as a district versus square to include businesses a block off of the square. Has that been discussed any further? Regarding the signage, the archway and the signage directing folks into the square, on having signage off of the square, one block off along the main corridors 65, 69, and 92. That signage is included in the plans that are presented. In terms of the design features and what's on there, the decision was was square. It was on one of the previous slides, so we can pull that up. Will IMU water and sewer utilities also be upgraded with this construction? Yes, it's a great question. And actually, that's probably one of the most important features of the streetscape design. On 3/4 of the side, on 3/4 of the square, there are 4-inch water lines. That is not adequate to provide fire protection services for those water lines. We had a couple cases of businesses that went in that could not put in fire sprinklers because the water lines were too small. In the event of an emergency with a water line of 4 inches, if our police or our fire department had to connect, they would collapse that line. So as part of this, the water lines are all being upgraded on the square. So that is a very important aspect of this project that many people will not see. But that's a very important aspect. Much of the infrastructure on the square are some of the oldest in the community. So along with the water, sewer, sanitary and storm sewer will also be upgraded. Does this mean the alleys will be replaced? There was a follow-up. Will the alleys be paved? In those areas where the utilities, the overhead power lines will be buried, and in those alleys where the sewers will be replaced, those alleys will be paved. So that will be another benefit as part of that. Mike Metcalf had talked about the electricity lines, and just to point out that the burying of the electric lines also provides reliability for electrical service when they're buried. What is the cost to IMU for their portion of the project? Charlie had reviewed a slide about the project cost. Did not, but as part of the project, there are, the project is broken out by the different funds. So most of the, so if there's a sanitary sewer line or a water line, those utilities are paying those costs. So sanitary sewer, that enterprise fund, and all these enterprise funds do not receive any property tax dollars. So they are entirely funded by user rates. So the utility itself will pick up that cost. So the sanitary sewer, that utility will pick up the cost for burying those lines or upgrading those lines. The water utility will pick up their costs for upgrading those lines. The electric utility will cover the cost of burying those electrical lines and any upgrades that are needed. Charlie, do you have anything you want to add on to that?
Yeah, the only thing I will add to that is that we are working through our final engineer's opinion of probable costs right now. So we don't have those exact figures on what those estimated costs will be. If I can maybe just go up a few slides here, because I know before Mike started presenting and before we had that quick malfunction, just wanted to point out here on this slide, we're replacing and upgrading. So Ryan mentioned water lines. We're also upgrading sanitary and upsizing sanitary lines, but about 1,000 feet worth of sanitary sewer lines. On our storm sewer, we're removing 1,000 feet and adding and upsizing approximately 3,000 feet. And with our water mains, we're replacing, and as Ryan said, upsizing in all cases, approximately 2,000 feet of water main lines. So just wanted to point that out. But again, we're working through those final costs right now. When we hit the 60%, we have been working with IMU. So IMU's got some preliminary cost data on that, but the final costs do have yet to be determined.
Okay, the next question is bioswales and permeable have added maintenance costs. Is the city planning for this added cost? And will our horticulturalists be in charge of maintaining the plant life and the bioswales? The answer is yes to both questions. The city, one of the features of this this project is that we've secured $1.7 million of grant revenue for these features. In addition to that, we secured another grant to for equipment needed to maintain the permeable pavers aspect of it, and then the Parks and Recs department will be maintaining the plant life. There are also features added into this the design where we'll have sprinklers for the plant life, so that will actually help streamline the process for staff, so we can deploy our staff resources to the other parks and other facilities.
And I just want to add one thing to that too. As part of our contract with Bolton and Mink, they are kind of coming up with for lack of a better term, a user guide on how to maintain these. So there's going to be a lot of kind of training and everything that goes on with our city horticulturists and how those get maintained. But we've been working with our Parks and Rec department and Angie Buchanan, our city horticulturist, on some of these features and what will take to maintain those.
The next is when jackhammering road or sidewalk areas, are there strategies that can be deployed to mitigate damage to businesses? We will, like the county, I believe, talked to the businesses and worked with the chamber to make sure that business owners are observing their property, taking pictures, being aware of their maintenance issues, and documenting those. But part of the coordination is to make sure that businesses are aware of what's starting when. So we will continue to coordinate that way. For each phase, are you still saying the street in the phase will be closed for about 3 months? The answer is it's.
Yeah, so Chad Kalsdorf is our engineer on this project with Bolton and Mink. And Chad, if you don't mind, I'm going to have you answer that because I think you do a much better job of explaining it.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. So the way we are setting up our phasing is that the street will have to be closed for a certain amount of time, but we are putting a limited number of days that the street can be closed. And it's about, depending on it's always based on the work, but we're estimating it's about 40 days per block that it could be totally closed. So once this phase is closed, they'll have 40 days. If it's kind of a double block, it'll be about 80 days where they can have the street totally closed before it has to be reopened. And if they don't do that, then we will penalize them financially as part of that. So there'll be other work going around that. They'll coordinate some of the other works, but for full street closure, we're trying to eliminate those blocks to as a minimal time as we can, and that would be about 40 days per block. And
Thank you, Chad.
and Ryan, if I
Once a street is closed for,
You wanted to add something.
sorry, go ahead.
Ryan,
Chad.
if I could go back to the previous question too about the jackhammering and the removal of the sidewalks, we are going to specify in the contracts that the contractors have to minimize the amount of removal damage. So we'll cause them or make them saw cut most of the concrete or any of the hard surface that has to come out. So you shouldn't have extended jackhammering or pounding as those things are removed. They should be removed with as minimal impact and shaking to the downtown as we can possibly muster. So.
Thank you, Chad. Once a street is closed for that phase, is there a contingency plan for workers on the just center parking off the square or in current city lots? Reason is last Tuesday when I was on the square, over 80% of the current parking spots were taken by construction workers. Our contract will have and stipulate that workers on this project will be parking in remote sites. The city does have leases with different parking lots around and off the square. And then regarding the Justice Center project, the city continues to relay concerns onto the county regarding the parking of the contractors. The city continues also, while stressing the importance of this and the contractors for the county, the city continues to look at options to kind of force the county to force their workers off-site. So we continue to work with the chamber and the county on addressing the current issue, but we'll have stipulations in our contract with our contractors that they will not be allowed to park on the square. Sorry, looks like I might have missed a question, but will there be parking on Buxton north of the square? After the one-way to two-way conversion, parking will still be permitted on those streets. Don't know, Charlie, I think you had some conversations with residents in the area previously about what side probably.
Sorry, so yeah, really quick on that. We are proposing to have parking take place on the same exact side that it is right now. And I'm trying to remember which side is which, because I think on Howard Street, the parking takes place on the west side, and on Buxton, it's on the east side. So yes, we're still going to have parking just on those sides of the street, because again, we can only have parking on one side of the street based off the width of a lot of those roads. It's just going to be in some instances that the direction your car needs to be parked to be parked legally might change.
Okay, the next question we have: several commercial truck drivers, semi-truck and trailer, jump on Buxton at Kennedy to avoid Jefferson. How will the city encourage commercial truck traffic to stay on Jefferson in lieu of utilizing North Howard and North Buxton residential streets? Part of the reason that we believe they are using that is due to the one-way and that boulevard. Charlie provided that speed data that feel along those routes. So by having the two-way conversion along with some additional stop signs along those corridors will likely help change that behavior. But then also, as we would with anything, continue to evaluate and look at other options.
Yeah, and the other thing I will add too is last summer, the city undertook a project to where we better timed our traffic signals along Jefferson that kind of works kind of in harmony with that point as well too, because we are making it easier if you are driving through town on Jefferson to get from the north side of town to the south side of town without having to make multiple stops. And as Ryan mentioned, some of the effect before that was done was there's a lot of stopping that takes place along Jefferson. People would get off then and go down Howard or Buxton because there's no stopping from Kentucky all the way down to the square. So again, adding those stop signs in will hopefully deter that, but at the same time, increasing better traffic flow along Jefferson with that traffic signal timing will also help out.
Okay, if East Kentucky is a minor collector, when will that street be repaved east of North Howard, the non-creep portions of that street? Michael, thanks for the question. We're not prepared as part of this presentation to talk about that. We can contact you and go through the CIP and kind of the pavement indexing study that the city did to kind of talk through timing. I don't have that information handy for tonight's meeting, so my apologies on that. There have been many studies in Oregon, California, and Texas that one-way roads are 50 to 62% safer, especially for pedestrians. Why would Indianola be different? The data that was provided earlier in the presentation illustrates part of what the committee, when they were reviewing this and made that recommendation to the city council, was part of the justification for that. The other thing that many of us learned as part of this process was that the one-way on North Howard and North Buxton was actually the result of some roadway work that was done on 65, 69, either I think in the late 60s or early 70s, and it was established as a detour and never did get converted back.
Yeah, the next question on the one-way and the timing of the conversion to two-way traffic with the Justice Center project going on, as well as some of our project going on. I'm going to answer that question first, and then Chad, I'm going to have you on as well too to help out, because this question actually came up during a coordinating meeting we had with the county last week, and Chad kind of gave a really good engineering explanation to it as well. But the one thing that we have to pay attention to is that our design on the square, once we start opening, a side at a time with our phasing plan, we need to have two-way traffic at that point to meet what that design is going to entail and what that design is going to have once it is opened. The other thing that we have to be very conscious of is when we, for example, let's say somebody's driving down Buxton Street from the north, and during that first phase there, they hit a road closed sign. Well, ultimately what they're going to do at that point is then turn around and drive back up, treating it as a two-way street anyways. So it's a little bit of twofold in that when we have streets closed, two-way traffic in a construction zone like that just works a lot better because people are able to go both ways. They're able to get to a business if they need to and then turn around and head out. But again, as we open these sides, they're going to be designed for two-way traffic at that point. So rather than piecemeal and say, okay, well, we're going to convert this corridor at this time to two-way traffic, and then this one, once we're done with that one, it just works better to do it all at one time and get that going. And then Chad, like I said, I'll have you kind of jump in as well too, because you also kind of gave a good explanation. And if I summed up what you were going to say, feel free to just pass.
No, I think you summed it up perfectly. We'll be changing the traffic pattern at this time. And so at that one time, we want to, when you make the change, you want to make it a complete change. You don't want to have multi-stages and go back and forth. It really is a matter of committing to it and going forward. And with all the construction that's going on the square and with our project, we're making a lot of those changes already. So it just kind of reinforces that pattern for all the drivers to adjust to that two-way traffic. And instead of going backwards to the one-way and then back to two-way, it's just kind of a nice clean break point at this point for helping to get drivers used to the new pattern. So.
All right, thank you, Chad. Appreciate that. Next question we had was, so a business on a closed street, what is the time we can expect no traffic in front of the business? Are you saying 40 days or 80 days? This information is important and has real consequences, for businesses in our building on the square. So Chad, again, I'm going to have you take this one. I'm just going to start out real quick by saying one of the things that we've worked with Bolton and Mink, and one of the things that we've done a pretty good job of while designing this project is to make sure, for example, if we are closing a street down in front of a business, that the sidewalk is still going to be open during the duration of the street construction. Once the street construction is done, we will then allow pedestrian traffic on the new street, and then we'll go through and do the sidewalks. That's one thing I wanted to put in there. And then Chad, if you want to just talk again about how that duration works with the businesses and what the businesses can expect as far as time that they might have no traffic in front of their business.
Yeah, Charlie, that's correct. The pedestrian traffic will remain open throughout all the phases of constructions. There might be a day or a half day closure where we have to bridge it, but we will inform you as we're putting back concrete. But we are going to minimize that, and we will coordinate that weeks in advance before it happening, and continually update you on progress on that. So a block if you have a block in front of your block, again, this is depending on the phases. If we go back to the phase map, phase 1 of the project will be allowed 80 days of full closure. That one it will be, that's a full closure for those businesses. So that's the first block there on Salem that we're starting to work on, and as it goes across almost all the way to the kind of the phase line there, we're hoping to beat that, but that will be fully closed for 8 days. All the other ones we have those broken down separately, and it depending on the block. So if a full block will get about 40 days of closure, full closure, no traffic allowed as part of that. Something that we're going to work on too with the contractor going forward is possibly minimizing that time as well. That would be the total time. If the contractor comes in and says we want the full block closed, we'll allow them to do that. And again, like I said, they'll have the specified amount of time to open it. The contractor does also have the option to maybe do a partial closure, take one lane out of the road to kind of open it up, do some of the groundwork, and then remove all the pavement as needed. And we will kind of coordinate that when we have a contractor on board. And we will definitely be posting and meeting with all the business owners of ahead of time of what was happening with the closures and the work plan for the contractor. So this is kind of, at this point, these are our best estimates, and these are going to be kind of the limits of what the contractor can do. As we get a contractor on board, we will finalize these plans and make them hard, like a very hard plan. And we're going to hold the contractor to those plans. And again, we will be very open, and we'll be reaching out to all the business owners on the square to communicate the plans for closures and providing, the contact information for our staff and for the contractor staff for if there's any questions that arise or if there's any issues. So hopefully that answers. It's a little open-ended still a little bit, but again, like I said, we are minimizing the amount of time that the road can be fully closed as much as we possibly can, and still allow the contractor to complete the work in a good and efficient manner.
Just thanks, Chad. I'm going to add on to Chad's comments. We have continued to work with the chamber. We've had, I think, at least 3 update meetings on the progress of the Streetscape project. The phasing plan that is presented here, again, is preliminary. Once we have a contractor in place and we can have the pre-construction meeting that takes place with large projects such as this, we will be able to fine tune and nail down the details of the phasing plan and what they're thinking. And again, we will continue, and we have continued to coordinate and communicate with the chamber, with the businesses on this. And then I'm just going to ask Charlie, because one of the questions we had was phase one. So I'm going to ask Charlie, when does that start and what section that is? If Charlie can walk through and just orient everybody, what streets are phase one and phase two, phase three, phase five, et cetera.
Yeah, and I apologize. I should have done that when we were on the screen here. Sometimes when you deal in this stuff every day, you realize that most maps always face up, so north is up. So we have, if you, I'm assuming my mouse pointer is able to be seen right here, but this is Salem Avenue right here. B Street would be about right here, and then First Street and City Hall is in this location. So this whole stretch here is Salem. You have Buxton going north, Howard going north.
Charlie, can you use colors? Talk about
Yeah.
use colors.
Yep. So again, phase one, the purple color, that's on Salem. This is the intersection of Salem and Buxton. This is all the phase one area. This one's really important again because the stormwater within the square all flows to this point and then exits the square. So to make sure that we're doing the quality stormwater and storm sewer improvements that we need to do, we need to start with this phase. Phase two, which is the yellow color right here, that would go from the intersection here of Howard in Salem, and that goes out to First Street, and then also includes the alley that is behind Regions Bank, and then where the drive-through bank lanes are. Phase three would include most of Ashland from Howard out to B Street, as well as the parking lot that is located behind the Indianola Chamber, and then the alley that goes in between there from the square and out. Phase four is the portion of Ashland here in the blue. So this goes from the intersection of Howard over to First Street, and then also includes the north alley right here. And then phase five, this would include Howard Street. One of the reasons phase five is going last here, and just to make this clear, and I think there was a question on this as well too, the county's got all of their equipment staged in these areas right now along Howard Street. So, and again, in our coordination with the county and in noting that we needed to allow the Justice Center project to be completed and have the ability for their trailers to still be parked on the road, we are proposing that one to go last. And then we'll also add in the southernmost alley with that as well down here. So getting back to the questions, just want to see where we're at. The next question I think was, wouldn't it make more sense to have the diagonal parking on the business side instead of the Justice Center side to prioritize access to the businesses over the Justice Center? I'll be honest, and Bolton and Mink can attest to this, when we first presented plans to the steering committee, that's exactly what we had on there because we all thought from the city and from the consultant side that made the most sense. The business owners were the ones who pushed back on that actually and asked us to change that. Reason being was a couple of things, but one of the biggest things that came out of those discussions with the business owners was they wanted more visibility to their businesses, and they felt like with parallel parking on the business side, that increased the visibility that they had on that. So that was some of the reason why we went with that. But again, it was something that initially we had proposed the other way around, and the business owners that were part of that steering committee asked us to change it.
The other aspect of that is it with the parallel parking on the outside, it maximizes the pedestrian space in front of the stores. And for the trees, one of the things that the community shared with the county when the county removed the courthouse was the lack of landscaping. So as part of this project, having the wider sidewalks allows for the addition of trees and more pedestrian space on the outer side.
Next question, what is the estimate a business will be without water or sewer once their street is opened up? Chad, that's another one I'm going to have you answer if you don't mind, because I think that's probably in the project specs.
Yeah, I think our estimate right now is less than a day. The way we're setting up the project is that the service will remain active, and it'll be, we're hoping that it'll be less than an hour or two. The way we're planning to do. So water service and sewer service will be disrupted for 1 to 2 hours at the most, is kind of what we're estimating at this time.
Thank you, Chad. Will the county project be done taking all the inside lane around the square by the time these phases are implemented? Again, we've been coordinating with the county on this, and I think I explained here just a little bit ago why we are choosing Howard as our last phase, and that's because a lot of that staging will be done on there. There are other areas that are around there, and again, we've worked with the county on that. There's going to be some fencing that potentially will have be moved as part of their project, but we'll get there with them on that. Can you please justify the elimination of so many parking spaces around the square, especially on the outside? Currently, there are 20 available parking spaces on the east side, and you are reduced for. This was really driven by the business owners on the steering committee who asked us to increase the sidewalk space. So to increase the sidewalk space, you again have to take something from somewhere. And that's where we looked at it and said, okay, well, if we're going to do that, if we're going to add potentially 6 to 8 feet to the sidewalk spaces, we're going to have to go out into the street to make that work. So that's some of the rationale. You know, we look at the courthouse project, and I'm spitballing a little bit here, but I believe there's currently 164 parking spaces that are available on the square. Now, right now, some of those are being taken out by the county's construction project, but a total of 164 parking spaces. I believe when the Justice Center was done, if there was no streetscape project that was occurring, the number was going to drop by 12. So from 164, then down to 152. And then our project comes and takes, I believe, another 18 out. So in the end, we still propose to have about 132 parking spaces that are on the square. Now, as part of that, we did a study last summer. It was last summer, I believe. Yeah, last summer, where we kind of did an inventory of the number of cars that were on the square at any given time during the day. And I think we did approximately 150 counts on those numbers. So what we saw with that was, on average, there was about 50 to 60 cars parked on the square at any one time. And the most cars that we saw on a Friday night, it was in May, a really nice night. I believe it was 110 cars that we saw parked on the square. So we're pretty confident with those numbers that we saw over that 2-month period in the summer, and the number that we are continuing to provide, that we will still have enough parking. However, don't also forget that we have about 400 spots available for citizens, visitors to park in that are visiting our square, in our public parking lots, in our leased parking lots, and so on and so forth. And then the other thing that we also have to be conscious of is when the Justice Center is opened, there's obviously going to be increased traffic and parking that's going to take place on that. But as part of the Justice Center project, they are including, I believe, 20 spaces or so that'll be located on the west side of the Justice Center. So while there might be an increase in parking and maybe those numbers go up again, we still feel like that 130 that we have available is going to be enough. And if it's not, then we do have those public parking spaces available.
And Charlie, I'll just add on to that. One of some of the feedback that we received from the community during the square assessment that was done in 2018, as well as the stakeholder meetings that we had with the business owners regarding the off-site parking. So the parking lots that Charlie mentioned was the appearance and the surface of those parking lots. And so part of the grant, the $1.7 million grant that we're getting, we're able to upgrade those parking lots that Charlie referenced during that. And so once the project's complete, then we're going to continue to work with the chamber and the business owners like we did previously to work on a parking strategy for making sure we're utilizing those parking lots to our advantage, and educating visitors, employers and employees, and designating those lots or availability of those lots to help free up the parking spaces around the square for visitors and patrons of the square.
Is there a particular reason why South Buxton and South Howard are excluded from a complete repaving to Highway 92? Right now, it's all budget. We have an amount that we're looking to spend on this that we've discussed with council and some of the estimates that we have. So at this point, with the amount of utility work that we are having to do in upgrading utilities, it's just not possible to include those in on there. But, you know, it's something that we will also keep an eye on, and there is a possibility in the future that we could add those in with the same design as other funds become available. One thing that we've done a really good job here at the city is seeking out grant funding when that does become available, and we'll continue to do that. So if we ever see an opportunity where we could add those in there, it's something that we would definitely look at. And then, will there be IMU internet interruptions? I'm assuming that answer is yes, but Kurt, if you're still on here, I'll kind of, okay, Kurt's not on here. Yeah, there's definitely going to be, and I would imagine it would be somewhere along the same lines that Chad mentioned earlier, where, you know, again, we're going to limit the amount of disruptions that we have while we're switching those over. And my anticipation would be that it's, you know, not going to be more than an hour here or there while we're reconnecting everybody, but probably within that day period. But yeah, Steve, I'll work with Kurt to get that answer, and I can make sure that we get a more concrete answer to you on that. So what was the target time for phase 2? Again, we got to get a contractor on board here to kind of really look at this, but you know, we're looking at possibly with phase 1 lasting anywhere from approximately 3 to 4 months. And if we start in the, you know, let's just say we start mid-May, so it looks like, yeah, I think we'd be looking. Chad, and if you're there, maybe you can answer that one a little bit better, because I know we've answered that question a few times for some people, but do you have kind of a good estimation on when phase 2, what the target time for that would be? And if you don't, I can look it up real quick on the exchange that we had.
Sure. I think it's important to note that all these construction times are estimates. They're weather dependent, and making sure we don't find something weird underground here as well. But I would estimate if we contractor on board in middle of May, starts digging in middle of the May, phase 2, the way it's currently located, we would look to be there probably the end of July is kind of where I would estimate that to come through, where they'd be starting to begin in that phase area.
And I see just a few other questions as I'm going through here. Will the city install signage to public parking lots? Yes, that is definitely something that we will add. I think Ryan mentioned that here just a little bit ago, that we are trying to do what we can to encourage that. I think currently there's a lot of people who don't understand where those public parking lots are available at. So yes, that is one thing that we will do, is not only increase signage, but possibly increase the size of the signage, because currently we do have some signage for those parking lots, but rather small signage. So yeah, we're definitely going to be looking at something like that, and just making sure that it is very obvious where those parking lots are. And then as I go through, I just want to make sure that we didn't miss any questions that are on here. And again, keep asking the questions. If you have any more, feel free to add them in here and we'll get it answered. And I think we'll stick around here for a little bit until the last participant is here, and answer any questions as they come on. And it appears that we have all of them answered at this point. If I did possibly miss one, feel free to ask it again here real quick, and put it on the bottom so we'll know where it's at. And yeah, hold on one second.
And if by chance you have a question after we conclude tonight, our city offices are all open. So you can stop in at City Hall. We will continue to work with Brenda at the chamber and host additional follow-ups. So we do put that information in our weekly email that goes out. Feel free to call or email us. Charlie's contact information is on the screen. So if you think of something later after tonight's meeting, feel free to contact us in any one of those fashions. We do appreciate everybody taking time out of their evening to participate in the presentation, and we greatly appreciate the questions. Amy has a question. Chad, can you pronounce and spell your last name for Amy Duncan? She's a reporter for the Indianola Independent Advocate.
Sure. It is Kahlsdorf. That's Kahlsdorf. Just pretend the H isn't there. It makes it easy.
Thank you, Chad. We do have just 5 folks in the attendees. One of those is a staff member. So Doug, you're free to go. Thank you.
Okay, we've got one attendee left. Drew, you're the last one on there. If there are any questions that you have from here on out, feel free to contact me at any time. Again, my information's on the screen there. My office line is 515-962-5276. My email address is cdesell@indianolaiowa.gov. And as Ryan mentioned, we're open to the public here at City Hall, so feel free to stop anytime, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and I am here to ask questions or answer any questions that you have. So with that, I think we are going to end our portion of the presentation here. We appreciate everybody joining, and everybody have a good evening.